right, welcome to another episode of Kicking It with the Belt Guy. It's me, the Belt Guy. There's the belt. I'm a guy. Real simple intro. More importantly, let's just get right into our guest today. Grateful to have David here from Ourlads Scouting, who just happens to also be a Giants fan. So we're going to get some professionalism and hopefully some really good subjectivity with the objectivity. So I'll just go ahead and bring David right on.
What's up, my man? How are you?
David, appreciate you being here. Thank you for the time. As always, more than happy to now learn that you're a Giants fan too. That's just sheer luck on my end because I did not know that. So that's going to make this a little bit more fun.
Awesome.
So before we even get into anything, tell me a little bit about yourself and the Ourlads. Tell me a little bit about how you ended up there and what you guys do. And that's always a really good way to start off the professional side.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's become quite the process. You know, I left college, graduated college in 2006, and really wanted to get into scouting. I was trying to use every avenue I possibly could. And I actually interviewed with Dave Gettleman when he was the pro personnel director. Before.
You have personally been involved in that. Give me some more. What was that? Now we got to deviate, right?
I had an interview with, I was trying to get a pro personnel summer internship program. And I met with him and Ken Sternfeld, who was the assistant director of pro personnel scouting back then. And I did not get it. I do think I was in the final running according to what they said. And I was left at this point where, you know, I had to decide, you know, do I go get a job or do I keep pursuing this and without any money? And, you know, bills pile up, you know, wasn't sitting on a bed of money. So I took a job in finance for a few years and, you know, was happy, was doing good, doing well, lived in Hoboken, living that corporate life. But I still had that desire, that itch to be involved in scouting. So I just did as much work as I could on my own and tried to network a little bit with some people that are pretty high up in the media right now. And I actually came across Dan Shanka from Ourlads Scouting and asked if I could work for him for free. And he sent me an assignment that I had no business doing because it was so much work and I had a full-time job at the time. But I slept 3-4 hours a night to get that job done and did it at night, did it in the morning. And long story short, I know this is going to get a little too boring to talk about my life, but I just kept working for him as much as I could. I started off as a depth chart manager, which is probably the most used component of Ourlads is how the depth charts for both college and NFL. And then I asked him if I could start writing some reports based on my own film study, and I asked him to help me learn the business. And you know, a few years later, we're on the East-West Shrine Bowl staff picking the players for that game. A lot of players in the NFL that were at the game that I was at, East-West Shrine, back in 2019. And some won a Super Bowl ring the last couple of years with the Chiefs. And, you know, the process just kept on strengthening, and they kept on giving me more and more responsibility to the point now I'm their senior draft analyst for Ourlads, and it's turned into a full year thing. I still own a business that is where my full-time job is right now. I own a CrossFit gym in New Jersey. And, you know, up at 3:30 in the morning, most mornings, so that I can do my scouting work and then go run the business that's been running for 10 years now. I left my career in finance to run that full time. So really, long story short, for 10 years, I've been doing 2 jobs that I consider for most of the year full-time jobs that just have to find opportunities to do it. And, you know, in scouting, the work is never done. And owning a business, the work is never done. So it's really just been finding a balance now with a 3-year-old and a wife that I love very much, that they're always my priority A and B, and work comes after them. But it's if I'm not with them, I'm working on one of those 2 things.
That is quite a journey, man. What a story, huh? That's amazing.
It'll be a good book someday, but
you've built up a little bit of no, that's amazing, man. Kudos to you for putting in that grind, right? At the end of the day, everything's always going to come down to hard work. There's obviously some pseudo luck involved, obviously networking, all these little paths, but there's no replacement for the hard work, and you're obviously putting in the hard work. So kudos to you for everything you're doing, not only in the professional side, but also your professional side, family side, all that. Congrats on obviously being a father. That's a whole different journey with a 3-year-old. It's still a fun stage, right? It's playing, it's all that good stuff. That's a fun stage. So definitely enjoy all that. But yeah, definitely amazing that, you know, you rose as quickly. So if you're up at 3:30, what time are you sleeping, man? I need to know what that sleep schedule's like.
It's not very healthy. I'll be the first to say that, but I try to be in bed by 9:30 most nights. Okay. There are nights where 10:30, 11:30 happens. I do have some downtime during the middle of most days where I can get some sleep in if I have to. But, I give myself a guilt trip that if other guys are grinding at that point, I got to be grinding as well. And like I said, the work with scouting, especially, it's never over. There's more tape to always watch and more things to try and learn. It's not just about putting your opinion out there. I put a lot of effort every year into just getting better at what I do and trying to learn from people that have been doing it longer than I have.
Absolutely. So before we get into your fandom subjective side, let's get a little bit objective since we just had a game. And from your scouting opinion, right? So you've been doing this long enough. You're a senior senior draft analyst. My apologies. What did you make of certain players, for example? So before we get into, and we'll stick with this regime for the moment. So before we get into the most current draft class, let's go back to 22, right? Evan Neal's all over the map right now, especially social media based. Last year did not go well for him. Looked good in spots. MCL happened, no problem. This year, I'm working with All Pro, not working with the OG Bobby Johnson, come in and get scraped. I mean, It was not pretty for him. It was even worse, in my opinion, for Glowinski than it was for Neal, especially if you go back and watch. At least Evan Neal had maybe one or two moments. I saw him actually recover, and I was like, okay. Glowinski, I saw none of that. He just flopped really hard. Pass pro for both of them, both in the run game, no problem. Glowinski is a step up above average. Evan Neal's very good actually in the run game, but when it came to pass pro, terrible. From your analysis standpoint, where did you have Evan Neal in the 22 draft? And now subjectively, how do you feel about watching his performance, even though it's a small sample size? We're talking about not even a full season worth because he missed games. So I know it's a loaded question, but talk to me from the scouting standpoint about Evan Neal.
Yeah, I mean, Evan Neal was back in the 2022 NFL draft. There were, if you remember back, there were really three tackles. You knew the Giants had to go tackle. A, it was the weakest point of the roster. B, you had a new regime. And usually when a new regime takes over, especially from a program like Buffalo, the first move is to go after the premium positions. And if you already have your quarterback, then you have to attack the lines. And that's exactly what they did. So I got asked by Paul Schwartz from the New York Post prior to the draft, who are the Giants going to draft at 5 and 7? And I said, I don't know about the second pick, but they're going to draft a tackle. The question was it going to be Ekwonu, who went to Carolina, Charles Cross, who went to Seattle, or Evan Neal? I both wanted and thought that the Giants would go after Evan Neal. And at that time, maybe not so much right now, but there's still a lot of football that needs to be played before you put a final stamp on what happened here. I felt that Evan Neal had the highest upside and was also the most pro-ready tackle and coming out of Alabama. The one issue I had with him, and this is in my scouting report, was that his bad tape was worse than both Ekwonu and Cross, their bad tape. These guys, when they come out, there's good tape and bad tape. You got to examine both and study both to help you project them to the next level. Evan Neal had balance issues. He spent too much time on the ground. He spent too much time trying to recover. Now, with that said, he was on the Bruce Feldman freak list, which is essentially reserved for the best athletes in college football every year. It's a must read for everyone in the NFL. Personnel scouting, you have to read that list to see who the best athletes are in the country. Evan Neal was on that. And when you know that he has that kind of athletic ability, but we don't always see it on tape yet, you still can try to trick yourself into thinking that with the right coaching and with the right work ethic, he is eventually going to blossom into a higher ceiling player than anybody else. That was part of my Evan Neal projection. We're a little over a year into his pro career, and we haven't seen it yet. And it would be foolish to dismiss him just because of a bad week one and a bad rookie year. It would also be foolish to ignore the fact that it was a bad rookie year and it was a really bad week one. And we, especially New Yorkers, right? We want to rush to judgment. We want to put a label on him right now. If you did that with Andrew Thomas at this point in his career, you would have ended up being very wrong because Andrew Thomas started off pretty poorly as well. I don't think he started off as poorly as Evan Neal, but the point of me saying this is I'm going to stand by my draft grade on him, which was the number one tackle in that class, at least until the end of this season, because I think a tackle that's starting right away gets 2 years to really prove what he can do.
So from your perspective so far, And some of the Collins you've mentioned, we've seen, right? Constantly on the ground, the balance issues, having to recover because, again, either it's because of the balance, not getting his feet out quickly. What do you think is going wrong for Evan Neal right now? Is it psychological? Is it because, I mean, the kid clearly is working hard. No one's saying there's no effort and he's just coming, sitting down and doing nothing. Why is it so far, at least, not necessarily translating to at least more of an average point?
It's a great question. And without being in the room with him and interact with him, it's really going to be a guess. But based on my experience and based on me just giving an answer for the sake of your question, I think it's psychological. I think he's thinking about too many things at once. I've seen this both with athletes that I've trained and also just from afar and hearing and listening to other coaches, is that a guy like Evan Neal, he wants to be great. He's very mature. We're not talking about Eric Flowers part 2. Where he's not putting in the work. That's not in the discussion right here. Very different situation. Evan Neal puts the work in on and off the field, and he wants to be great. But I think from what I can see, I think he's trying to do too many things at once. He's not reacting. He's trying to plan ahead. He's thinking too much. Nothing seems natural. He played right guard, left tackle, right tackle at Alabama in 3 seasons. So he never played the same spot 2 years in a row. Gets moved back to right tackle as a rookie in the NFL. So this right now, 2023, this is the first time that Evan Neal has played the same position in 2 years in a row since he was in high school. So I don't think there's been enough repetition here for him to really fully grasp what he's doing. It seems like things are just not comfortable with his footwork on one play, his hand placement on the next, and then just keeping his head on a swivel and knowing what's coming, what the defense is doing. To try and learn in the NFL with the amount of speed, and especially Sunday night against that Dallas front, which might be the best in football because of Micah Parsons and all the accessory pieces they have, it's a really tough thing to learn on the fly like that. So, and I hate to say it because I know not everyone wants to hear it, but the guy deserves more time.
And that's fair, right? Everyone's being reactionary right now, which is normal. That's what fans do. They're reactionary. Yeah. The patience game is out. There was a time when quarterbacks had years before they had to perform. That doesn't even exist, right? You get like 4 to 6 games as a rookie, and you better get in there. Everything's become very instantaneous for gratification. Right? Jordan Love is showing you what happens when you can wait a few years and learn.
Yep.
It was a great week 1 for him as a statement for someone. Now,
it was.
You mentioned obviously facing Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, that group really turned it around with Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn, excellent defensive coach, excellent coach. Brings me to my next question. OG Bobby Johnson, his job is to develop, right? They picked up Izudu at 67. He's not starting.
Mm-hmm.
Evan Neal not showing much development.
Yep.
Where does Bobby Johnson lie in this? What's the level of culpability for him as the coach here versus the player? Because you know what the traits are of the player. You scout them. What about the coach himself? Is he doing his – and again, this is from afar, obviously. We're not sitting with him. But is the coach doing enough here?
It's a great question. And, the one counterpoint to that is Andrew Thomas had his best season ever under Johnson. So
it's fair.
He has to take the bad with the good. And any responsible coach will take part of the blame. Any responsible coach that I respect won't take any of the credit. So if you're going to ask him, he better say it's on him. He better say that he needs to do a better job developing these year 2 players. Because the way to build a successful offensive line in the NFL right now, it's through the draft. It's too expensive because there's such a rare commodity in the NFL. There's so much demand for quality offensive line play. There's so much demand for depth along the offensive line around the league. You're not going to be able to afford it, especially now that you're paying a quarterback, especially now that you gave that contract to Andrew Thomas and Dexter Lawrence. You're going to have to draft. And if you think at the end of this year you don't have your guys, it's priority A for the offseason, more than a wide receiver. This offense will not work. You will not get what you can out of Daniel Jones, who you just paid $40 million if you can't keep him upright. So they better have this answer at the end of the year. And Johnson should know the most. And behind closed doors, if he says, hey, I've done everything I can with these guys and Evan Neal just doesn't have it, Izudu just doesn't have it, they got to go back to the drawing board and get some more bodies in there.
Sure. Fair enough. That is correct that you are right. Andrew Thomas has exceeded, whereas so far, I want to say failed, but the other two have struggled at this point. So at least one production-wise, the other one even kind of just getting there and playing at this point, which is probably the most shocking thing to me, because between Izzudu and Glowinski, what do you really got to lose at this point? Glowinski is going to get released after. There's no way they're bringing him back. So you might as well just let the kid play and see what he's got. He had a good few weeks before he got hurt. Granted, not great in pass pro, but talk about a road grader. I mean, he rocks people on the second level. So again, that's objective for me. No training, no nothing, just regular fandom eyes and nothing else.
You're right. I mean, Izzudu at some point has to get a shot. I mean, we might be seeing him play left tackle this week against Arizona if Thomas can't go. And that was a position. I mean, I got asked before the 2022 draft to take draft grades out of the picture. Who is simply just your favorite player, one of your favorite players in the draft, someone that you think is going to exceed expectations, how you are sure that he's going to exceed expectations in terms of where he's drafted. I got asked for 5 names, and Izzudu was one of them. This is before the Giants drafted him. He played guard, he played tackle. He had a lot of pro-ready traits, heavy hands, but he couldn't sustain good contact last year. And even in preseason this season, it seemed like there's a footwork issue. There's not a footwork shortcoming in terms of athletic ability and talent and potential. It seems like there's another mental disconnect there, that once he gets his hands on guys, he stops moving his feet. And to block in the NFL, you have to keep the feet active. You got to be quick and really be able to mirror guys. And he hasn't been able to show that on a consistent level. But at the same time, we haven't seen enough to have a definitive statement. And I would rather struggle with youth than a veteran that you know is not going to be here next year. So I'm on the same page with you that if Glowinski does not step it up, you might give him another game or two. And then Izzudu's got to step in at one of those spots, which is likely left guard. And then you would move Bredesen over to the right side.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Literally what you just said is kind of what we just saw with Izzudu, right? The special teams play, the block was him, first off, lining up very oddly to begin with. If you keep going back to that formation, he's very perpendicular, if you will, to the formation, which is odd to begin with, and why he was so far either inside. That could even been potentially borderline illegal formation. But for him to be that far diagonal and perpendicular to begin with, but then like you said, the ball snaps, the hands move, the feet never do. It's like you just said, something was missing and not connected. Point of attack happened, the feet never move. Same with Neal, right? Hands go, feet don't move until it's too late. And in the NFL, that's it. It's over for you. You're already too late. You have to be one ahead. So yeah, you live and die with youth. But yeah, what you're pointing out so far is what we're seeing, which would be the issue, or at least one of our question marks is what do you do next in those scenarios? So from that 20, and again, you were there at the game, so I'm sure it was just as bad when that replay went on that big old jumbotron, if at all.
It was.
So speaking for the rest of the 22 class, one more question on Neal, because I don't want to drill the world on just Neal. I'm sure the whole world is on his case anyway. My only question would be, if you don't see a uptick of some kind, and I don't know what that measuring stick is, it's going to be different for everybody when it comes to production, what they see with their eyes. If you don't see that, would you consider moving him at right guard? Is he better suited to play as a guard, more of a road grader, and have a better chance playing against D tackles as opposed to speed rushers, because the speed is murdering him? I believe he might be. That's the only Eric Flowers comparison I'll make. A guy that was set at tackle that did a little bit more decent at guard, whereas maybe tackle's not for you. He is a very large human being. Would he be better suited, in your opinion? Is Neal better suited to potentially be a guard than a tackle?
It's possible. It would be foolish of me to say that it's not possible. And the fact that he has played an entire season there and at pretty high level. I mean, it's not common for a freshman to show up at Alabama playing for Nick Saban and to be a week 1 starter on the offensive line. It almost never happens. He was one of the guys where it did happen, and he played at a high level at right guard. Now, I mean, we're talking 2020 season or the 2019 season. It's a long time ago. But the biggest issues that you see with Evan Neal are in space when you don't have any help to the right side. That's where I feel like his biggest issues are. It's the initial footwork, and he just feels like he's all alone on an island. In some cases he is, but he abandons the technique because of the space to his right. That is now erased if he's playing inside. He's got at least some help, potential help to his right. He's got some potential help to his left. So if we see another full season of struggle, and you're not making a move in season, in my opinion, because you haven't been practicing him at guard at all. If he plays this way, right? Hypotheticals, right? Everyone loves to talk about hypotheticals. If he does not improve, like you said, get to that measuring stick, whatever that level of improvement is that you need or they need, I think that's the first move you do, is maybe that's the right guard solution in 2024. But I think we should erase the idea that it could happen this season, unless something gets really ugly or injuries start to pile up and they, at the same time as Evan Neal's playing bad. But I don't even want to go down that path right now. For the sake of your question, can I see him playing guard? Could that be the move? If he really does struggle and it's just not a spot for him, that will be the first move for him. And I do think it could work in there. I really do.
In that case, you have this kind of jack of all trades guy in Azudu again, where you can flip to either a right guard or a right tackle or even left guard, because I like Bredesen, but he's a free agent next year. Are you paying another guy on the offensive line or something going to beat you up, right? Because like you said, the way to build is through the draft. You can't keep paying these guys too much of a premium. And they just invested in a center who looked decent, was not terrible at all. The snaps got to get worked on, but he held his own against quite a front. Sticking to 22, give me your thoughts, just like you did on Neal. Tell me about Kayvon Thibodeau.
Man, this is going to be a little controversial, but that's what gets ratings for you, huh? I'll say this. I really wanted last year in that draft for those first two picks to be Evan Neal and Garrett Wilson, the wide receiver that the Jets ended up getting. That's who I was banging the table for. I was not upset by Kayvon. He was one of the top 20 players in the entire country on my board. I thought top 10 was a little rich for him. And, you saw in flashes some impact. And we see this a lot out of young edge rushers, right? You watch them every play and you're expecting something great every time. And if you don't see it, and now you're calling him a bust. He did flash enough last year, but he disappeared for stretches. Again, that's common. So what do we want to see in 2023 that we did not see the other night? And it's okay because it's only one game and you don't want to overreact to one game. But we don't see a power game here. He does bend well enough, and if he gets under the pads of a blocker on his outside shoulder, he can at least maintain ground as he turns a tight edge. But on a play-to-play snap, whether it's against the run or a simple bull rush opportunity, the power's not there. And if you look at the body type, I talked about this prior to the draft, he's got wide receiver legs. It's almost, for lack of a better term, it's weird. And I remember I was up close with him at training camp last year. And he's very broad up top. And sometimes that's the only thing a fan will see or look at. But really, we know, or if you know anything about sheer power and strength, it's all below the waist. Sure. That's where he's smallest, and that's where he's weakest. And that's the concern I have with his game. All great pass rushers in the NFL right now. I'm not talking about your third down pass rush specialists. Sure. The great every down edge players, they all have a power element to their game. All of them. And Thibodeau does not have that right now. And does that mean he's a complete throw him to the curb? Absolutely not. I mean, he had one of the best defensive performances of all the rookie defenders last year, where he's in the game that he scored the touchdown, strip sack.
Against the Commanders,
Yep. He came up with some big plays, and you saw some of the flashes. It's there. He can do it. But to be a top 5 pick at a premium position and to really pay those dividends, you got to be a serious big-time contributor week in, week out. And he's the kind of guy that I could just see disappearing for 3-4 weeks at a time. And because of the talent, and it's real talent, you'll see him come up with a big game like that against the Commanders again. And all of a sudden that everyone's going to come out of the woodworks and say, hey, this was worth it. But right now, for what the Giants they had an opportunity in the last year in the top 10 to grab that wide receiver one in Garrett Wilson. And to go after Kayvon Thibodeau, who's going to be a solid but not great pass rusher, in my opinion, sure. It's still kind of sitting sour in my head.
So do you think Kayvon is more of the Jadeveon Clowney, what he could be, but consistently is not, almost type scenario, right? You could be this. We see the flashes, and when we see the flash, we go, oh my God, but really consistently, he's actually this.
Probably. I would say similar situation, very different kind of player.
Absolutely. Just situation, correct.
Situationally, yeah. I mean, I compared Thibodeau to Harold Landry, who's an outside linebacker for the Titans. He missed last year with an ACL injury that he suffered prior to the season. But I think the year before that, he was 11.5 sacks, I think 40-plus pressures, good player. But when you talk about your top 10, 15, 20 edge rushers in the NFL, you're probably not going to bring him up. Now, does that mean he's a bad player? Absolutely not. But when you have those opportunities to pick top 10, and the top 2 edge defenders had already gone, and Hutchinson and Trayvon Walker, it almost seemed like they were just saying, hey, we got to get an edge guy. he's the one that's sitting there. We're going to go take him and hope for the best.
Sure.
I'm still holding out hope that he could be a very good defender for this team, but it's not going to be enough to turn the pass rush over by itself, because they need a lot more help, or they need an absolute superstar, and that's not what he is.
Yeah, and again, we've seen it where there's even expectation for Ojulari. We didn't see much out of him either, which is a little bit surprising because of what he showed you last season as a flash with his Ben. So, and again, even against Dallas, there were not many true pass sets, if we're being honest, where you can actually rush the passer in that terminology, from outside of just the casual eye thing of, oh, why didn't you get there from that scenario? But yeah, the one thing you hit a nail on the head that we're waiting for, and I think even Wink alluded to this offseason, about having an honest conversation with Kayvon and how he needs to strengthen up. And he's probably talking about the same thing you are, right? Where's your lower half? Where's that power coming from? Because I think we've seen Kayvon try to bull rush, but we haven't seen the tackle take any steps back. He kind of gets walled right there. So that's going to be a big part of him. There's only so much you're going to be able to leverage, either with technique or one or the other. It's got to be the combination. So, like I said, you can't just give up on him, because he actually did play a decent game. Not so much from the pass rush. I don't think there was any pass rush happening, minus Dexter Lawrence on the inside for this pass game. But generally speaking, the tools are there. There's absolutely hope. If you were sitting at 5, you would have took Garrett Wilson at that point? You would have been comfortable taking the wide receiver at 5?
Yeah, I would have went Evan Neal at 5 if you wanted me to get really specific, and then it would have been Garrett Wilson at number 7.
Okay. Do you feel like they took Kayvon, not only do we need an edge rusher, but there's a drop off after that? Or do you feel like there's a comparable guy that you could have gotten the second round? Or do you feel like those are kind of your tops, and after that there's a little bit I'm not sure?
Off the top of my head, there was a guy that I really did like as a day 2 pick, and he would have been there. I can't remember exactly where he went in the draft, but I do think he was available for the Giants' second pick. And it was Drake Jackson, who ended up going to the Niners. Coincidentally, he just had a 3-sack game in week 1, and the Giants will be seeing him in a week from tomorrow, because the Giants play on a short week. But no, I really don't think – I can't tell you what they were thinking when they took Thibodeau. From my perspective, there was a really deep edge group in that draft. And Thibodeau had that 5-star number 1 high school recruit, strong freshman season at Oregon. And I always get concerned about those guys, because it almost seems like they live off reputation a little bit. And as he got deeper into his career at Oregon, you didn't see him take the step up. And this is all stuff I noted in his scouting report. Always a good player, borderline great college player, always.
Sure.
But you never saw him. I always noted that the scary part about him was when he played against big physical tackles. And I know he had a little ankle injury his last year at Oregon, but when he played against big physical tackles, he did not have that sheer dominant game that we saw him play against when he was smaller guys that honestly are not in the NFL right now. That's where he did most of his work in college. And hindsight's always 20/20, and we're by no means looking down on the Thibodeau pick. We still have a lot of time to watch him develop, and he does do things at a very high level. But it was a pretty deep edge rusher group in that draft class, and I just didn't think it was a necessary asset to use a pick on that position just because of the position itself.
Sure, and fair. Like I said, right, you have a professional side of objectivity versus your subjective, I'm a fan, and always appreciate getting some objectivity. Even though you're a fan, we always have to look from that lens, because all fans really just see it through their own lens, which is mostly one that probably doesn't make sense more often than not, because that's what fans are. So if I take a step back even a little bit here into 21 real quick, Micah Parsons. Would you have pulled the trigger? Like, where were you there? Where was he? Again, I'm going back to your professional aspect of you're sitting there. We have this Penn State scenario situation, and then we have the Giants way and the character. We have all that, quote unquote, and then we have the player, and you have that whole thing go down, and he's sitting there. They trade down. What are you doing in that spot? You going back? Or are you like, nope, I got to get this guy?
I love the trade. So I'll go on record saying that I don't like what they did after the trade. The Tony pick was terrible. I said it back then. I'll say it right now. It was a terrible decision to do what they did there. But they did flee Chicago. I mean, you look at every draft pick value chart out there. It was a great deal. But Parsons I think he was one of the top 10 players on my board in that draft. And the fact that he was there, and just like the Giants, I wanted Devontae Smith, who the Eagles traded up in front of the Giants for. I think everyone in the world knew that the Giants had a hard on for Devontae there. So I think that's really what.
Definitely no secret. It was very much the whole Jerry Reese. I'm going to tell you who I want. Somebody else go get him.
So, Parsons was one of the highest linebackers I ever graded. And I loved what he brought to the table. And, it's hard to see him on a division rival do what he's doing, especially week one on the field. But, there were some character issues there. Some are confirmed, some are kind of speculation. People I get to talk to that are in the business, they did say there were teams that were not going to consider drafting him. I don't know if the Giants were one of them. I wouldn't be surprised if they were. They had someone on their coaching staff that coached Micah Parsons at Penn State. So, that's as much inside information as you're going to get. So if they didn't feel good about it, I get it. But I hate to say that I'm sitting there telling you that Micah Parsons is going to be an all-pro year one. I wasn't. I didn't say that. And, I like the trade down. I was happy with it. I just think that they miscalculated what they did after that trade down. And I thought there was a couple players there that they could have grabbed that they didn't.
When they're going wide receiver, for my money's worth at that time, I was wanting to pull on Rashad Bateman.
Yeah,
I would have took Bateman at that spot if it was going to be a wide receiver. Just between those that went, that probably would have been my guy. But again, strictly just from a fan standpoint, same thing. Tony was very much like, okay, let's see type. Let's see, because you don't know, and that hasn't worked out well for anybody. It's worked out well for us for what we got back in return. But generally speaking, it's not working out great for the Chiefs so far. Sam's the punt return, which good looks because they helped beat the Eagles. So great one there. But going back to that 22 draft class, what did you think of Wan'Dale Robinson? Everyone was very, very surprised by that pick. High second-round pick. I'm not going to say not on a lot of people's radar, but obviously when you're advocating for like a Garrett Wilson type, different body size, all that, when they went for Wan'Dale, where were you on the Wan'Dale scenario?
So love the player, the prospect. He was another guy, ironically, when I was asked about those 5 players, who do I think is going to outpay the initial draft slot. Wan'Dale Robinson was Ezdu was one, and Wan'Dale was one of the other ones. So it was just kind of a surprise. But I'm looking at it right now. He was my 12th graded wide receiver in that draft class. And there was multiple guys still on the board that Robinson went ahead of. The asterisk here, though, and one thing you can understand why, was he's a gadget guy. And it seemed like they were really going after, and maybe even in a forceful way, that they were going after a very specific kind of weapon for this new offense that Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka. It wasn't just a wide receiver. This was a guy that played running back at Nebraska before transferring to Kentucky. This is a guy that could return kicks and punts. This is a guy that lined up in the slot. He lined up out wide. He did everything. So that's defines a gadget player. That when he comes on the field, the defense does not know where he's going to line up. It could be in the backfield, it could be in the slot, it could be out wide. And then you throw in the speed, you throw in the play strength that he has, the contact balance, the yards after catch. The reason I didn't really put him above, I had like a 3rd, 4th round grade on him, was the fact that he was off the charts small, right? I keep track of every arm, wingspan, hand measurement, everything, every metric you can come up with from every player that's ever drafted. Wan'Dale Robinson was off the charts with how small he was. Not just the height and weight, but also the wingspan. So now you're talking about a guy that you just don't have a lot of margin with when you're throwing him the football. Like, you got to be on the money because he doesn't have a radius to go get the ball away from his body. And, we haven't seen him yet. The limited that we did see him in his rookie year, you could see there's something there. He can make things happen. And that's one thing the Giants just don't have. They don't have any explosive elements in their passing game. And we're rewinding back to last year, right? This is before Jalen Hyatt was drafted. So they viewed him as the guy that's going to create something in this passing game. And it didn't work out because he got hurt. And the Giants ended up last in the league in explosive plays from the passing game. So, the book is still out. I'm glad that he's, going to be back, it looks like, in the coming weeks, because I do think he brings an element to the Giants offense that they currently do not have. So the jury's still out on any year 2 player, but especially someone that's missed as much time as him.
Yeah, it seems like this regime really has a thing about not so much size as much as separation.
Yeah.
Look at the Cole Beasley scenario. They brought in 19 slot guys, whatever. It seems to be guys who can separate, and it seems to be more about yak. And Wan'Dale, to your point, seems to be what people would have hoped Kadarius Toney would have been. A gadget player type, right? Running back, wide receiver, can separate, yak, all that good stuff, but probably without all the issues that you're clearly seeing Kadarius Toney has, whether it be social media or otherwise, just kind of, being a little bit too much out there, especially being in New York, man. I mean, Brian Daboll is being killed about this birthday party story that you've probably seen too. Like, welcome to this media market, right? This is what happens here.
Yep.
So if you had to pick from the 22 draft class for the Giants, your favorite pick, least favorite pick, and then I'll quickly ask you a few about this current draft class because I know you also have a little bit limited time. So do you have a favorite pick from the 22 draft, regardless of production? Who was just your favorite pick?
I mean, at the time, my favorite pick was going to be Evan Neal. And that's why I'm still, maybe that's me being a little biased and holding out hope for him. Because I do, the talent is there and the mindset's there. In terms of work ethic, is the mindset there in terms of being able to fully concentrate on one thing at a time and trust your ability. If there's one thing I could say to him, not that he would ever listen to me, I'm just a guy in a dark room right now talking to you, but the trust your ability. It's there. Trust your power because you see him when he locks onto guys, it's over. When he really is in a good position, we've seen good reps out of him. When his feet are there, his balance is there, and his hands are where they need to be. You're not getting off him. And you can't say that about a lot of young tackles that are struggling. They just don't have the ability to do it. He does. And I think my least favorite one, we already talked about it, so we probably could move on, but it was Thibodeau. Not because I don't think he's a good player. I just thought there was better value on the board, and I don't think he's ever going to get to the point of being that premier edge rusher that many thought he would be after his freshman year in Oregon.
Sure, because we just didn't see that dominance you like to see, right? It was kind of like you got, like you said, the flashes were there, all that good stuff was there, but not that dominance / consistency you want to see. Because if you don't see it at the college level, the chances of it happening in the pros are a lot slimmer than they aren't. 23 draft comes up, right? Everyone pseudo agrees, wide receiver, cornerback, center were the three main we need anyway. Go ahead and rattle off those three for me. How did you feel about those first three, obviously between Banks, JMS, and then the trade up for Hyatt, and then just overall your thoughts on the class? Like Jordan Riley, we saw flash. Nobody even heard of this guy. Flashed in a game. So maybe your Leonard Williams replacement sure as heck looks like it's already in the building.
Yep. This draft class, in terms of immediate dividends, they've only played one game, but just between preseason and camp, it looks like a potential superstar class. The Giants are starting two rookies at outside corner. Nobody in the NFL has done that in 15 years, and one of them is a 6th rounder too. It's not like they went 1st round, 2nd round. And we saw a day 3 pick star at cornerback. He almost won Defensive Rookie of the Year last year, Tariq Woolen from Seattle. Sometimes Joe Shane even admitted this on air during one of the preseason games. Hawkins surprised them. They knew that he was gifted, a good athlete, but they had no idea how good he was when they drafted him, and he opened eyes at camp. So if you're getting something out of that, a starting corner in the 6th round, and then a defensive tackle in Jordan Riley that, he made one of the best plays of the night on a night there weren't many good plays against the Cowboys. That immediately just gives you that nice positive vibe from the class. Deonte Banks played well until he cramped up. He only played 25 snaps, I believe. But both him and Hyatt, to me, what I like about this is that they're both really high upside athletes. They're both what I call a swing for the fence. Maybe not the best football players yet, but they have talent and ability that nobody on this team has when it comes to speed and size and ability to really change a game. And Hyatt, he's not a big, thick guy, but he's long. And and you combine that with the easy speed that he's showing, and he burned Sauce Gardner twice in that Jets preseason game. And that's the best corner in football, maybe one of the best 2 or 3 corners in football right now. And the fact that he did that right away, the more comfortable he gets in this offense, the more comfortable the coaching staff gets with him, I guarantee we're going to see more and more of him. Unfortunately, his one target against Dallas was a poor throw by Daniel Jones because he had space to work with. If Jones put that ball even somewhat on the money, that might have been the biggest play. It wouldn't have changed the game at all. They still would have got their butt kicked. But you want to see, at least in games like that, something positive.
Sure, and I think it's a confidence builder, especially for the young kid, right? I can hang in this league. I can play this game.
What Will Fuller did for the Texans when Deshaun Watson really started to hit his stride out there is what Jalen Hyatt can do for this offense. That's what I think he can do. And Will Fuller was, not everyone really clearly remembers how good he was of a deep threat. He just kept getting hurt. but he had a couple years there where he was one of the scariest wide receivers downfield in football. And it changed how Deshaun Watson played football. It changed how that Texans offense won games. And that's what the Giants don't have. They don't have an explosive element in the passing game. So I'm really optimistic about both these guys as athletes. But again, Giants fans, I think you're going to have to be patient. They're just not, they don't have a ton of experience playing college football. It's very rare for someone to come into the league at their experience level and just knock the doors down right away. Schmitz is the complete opposite. I don't think he's ever going to be a superstar. I don't think he's ever going to be a top 10 center in football. But I think he's going to be a guy that can start games for a long time and at least give you a high floor so that you know your center is not going to lose you games. The Giants have had some really poor center play over the past decade since Sean O'Hara has left, really, if you think about it. You haven't had a consistent guy in there. And
I would say Weston Richburg was decent, but the injuries never let him maximize his potentials, right? Because
you're right.
In his second contract in San Francisco, he got paid. Yep. Same thing, injuries. He potentially could have been, but you're right. Aside from that, it's just a rotating door.
You just want a guy that's glue. You don't need a superstar in there. And I think that's what Schmitz. He just seems safe to me. And don't expect all pro caliber play, but I do think you can expect a higher floor than what they've been working with, and just kind of put a check in that box as they try to build the rest of the offensive line. So I do think that the Giants take the fandom out of it, right? The Giants did a really good job in the draft. And what I like the most, in contrast to what the previous regime was doing, they have a plan. And now we're going to see, hopefully not, but we might see what is their plan B when their plan A does not work out. That's where a front office really separates himself.
Yeah, absolutely. You need a backup plan to the backup plan in this industry and in this world. But going back to your Jalen Hyatt statement, the two guys I continuously brought up, just again, envisioning how you see him, was Deshaun Jackson and then a healthy Will Fuller. That was the other name or at least the player I kept saying, because that would be the impact or the use you can see him being. Because when Will Fuller was on the field, it changed the way the defense had to play because you had to account for him. Whether it was the safety having to shade and having to double cover with the corner, wherever the case may be, eyes were on him. And that opens up the game for everybody. So love that comparison. Somebody even brought up Mike Wallace, a.k.a. Stonehands. There was a time where all he was doing was just dropping them, man. Mike Wallace is the same way, just game-changing ability, and makes the game easier for everybody else. Did you have Jordan Riley or Trey Hawkins in your world of scouting as well, on any board, any place whatsoever, or were you even like, who are these people?
Never got to the point where who are they? We do so much work. We have a list of 2,000 names prior to the draft, and there's always, at the very least, under everyone, there's some background information. But I think combined on those guys, because this is not my full-time gig, probably spend a combined 15 minutes watching tape on them, and immediately had a free agency grade. One of the reasons I had a free agency grade on Riley was he had an extended injury history, and he played for 4 or 5 different programs over the course of 4 years, which is that's not what it means 10 years ago. It's so easy to transfer now. You don't have to sit out at all. And with COVID, that even threw some things off too. But both those guys had free agency grades on my board. And watching Riley right now, and I actually was watching Oregon tape from last year leading up to this season just to do some prep work for this year's crop, because Oregon's got a handful of defenders that are going to be in the draft next year. It was a game that he played well, and he was you could see it there a little bit. And with these guys, if you get the wrong tape, you could easily put a free agency grade on. But if you get the right tape, I mean, you could see what they were getting in him. I don't see a ton of pass rush potential here, which in today's NFL, that does mean something that it didn't mean 15 years ago. Like, if you're not going to impact the passing game, it's immediately going to deduct you. And I don't see that in Riley. But he could have a similar trajectory to Dexter Lawrence in that early on run defender. Later on, you develop some pass rush skills and you just get so big and powerful and you know what to do with your hands that at the very least you have a solid bull rush, right? And you could kind of shrink the pocket a little bit. So I think just watching him in pre-season, watching him in camp, watching week 1, I think the Giants do have something here that they don't have in DJ Davidson, who they drafted the year prior.
Yeah, so there's almost your plan B for that plan A that you spoke about might be the Riley scenario. So I have a couple more because I know you have to go, but there's 2 or 3 I definitely want to get off. One of the things is more conversation than a question, right? It seems to be year after year, the entire league is struggling with the O-line. Are these kids just getting rushed out way too quickly out of college? And when they get to the pros, they're just literally not ready, no matter even if it's a blue chip, whatever you say, right? Because that's a one of one when those guys are. is there a pipeline issue here between the rush to get to the pros, and that's part of the bigger O-line issue? What are your thoughts on that?
I have two thoughts. One of them is nothing to do with the offensive line. I think that the pipeline is being fed best athletes in the game. Go play defensive line. Go play pass rusher. Go play linebacker. Just the overall talent and ability level of defensive linemen now. We're seeing numbers that are almost becoming normal that 5-10 years ago, you would have been like, there's no way he ran that. There's no way he measured that. There's no way he can produce that way. There's dozens of guys running 40s and shuttles and three cone. No, that's not the end all be all. You're just talking about a lot more athleticism in the defensive line. It's just tougher to block now. And there will be a response at some point. I think that you're going to start seeing, you already have started to see what offensive linemen are being paid now. And now if you're, a youth league coach, a high school coach, you're going to start getting some of these best athletes that you have with the best size, and you're going to start developing them on the offensive line because the demand is so high. We've already seen this shift in high school, college with defensive backs, where these former wide receivers that, hey, your hands just aren't that good enough, or, hey, there's going to be more opportunity for you to make it on the defensive side because the wide receiver market is so saturated. There's so many of them every single year. If you truly want a shot, get over to the defensive side. So at some point, you'll see some of the shift back to the offensive line, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. And the other thought is something that I learned at the East-West Shrine when I got to work with an offensive line coach that was there coaching those guys. The strength, they're just not strong as they used to be coming out of college. He just kept on saying, he goes, every time I run into an offensive lineman and interview them in the pre-draft process, one of the first things I want to ask is, do you guys lift anymore? He was making a little bit of a joke, but he said, and that's a disconnect I think a lot of people have, NFL to college or college to NFL. Yes, it is a faster game. We know that. It's also a much stronger, much more powerful game. And if you're not strong enough, I don't care what your 40 time was. I don't care how good your technique is. If you're not strong enough, you don't have an anchor, you're not going to last.
So do you believe strength is being compromised for this athleticism world, right? You might not be the strongest, but if you're the quickest, I'll put you and develop you as opposed to the other guy, because you know what? Your feet might be a little bit slower. You might be a little bit bigger and sluggish, but man, that guy's strong. So that kind of scenario.
Yep. I think that there's a huge disconnect between how you can get better at playing offensive line football, that it's all about speed. I think it has more to do with strength, power, and size.
Fair enough. So now the $160 million question. What was your Daniel Jones take back in 19? Forget the production you've seen, forget the translation. Give me what your thought process was leading up to 19 and what your thought process was now as both objectively and as a fan at the same time, because that would have been an interesting reaction at times. So I'm just curious. Daniel Jones, 2019, pick six comes up. What are you thinking?
So I was as surprised as anyone. I can read you what I had on him. It'll take a minute. I'll just read the closing paragraph. I'll say, I wanted to like Jones more than this. I really did. I have a thing for tough quarterbacks, and I do think he brought his teammates to another level. That's a trend that can really make a kid break out in the NFL. While I do have a first-round grade on him, I do think he can be in play at number 17 because of the position he plays. I think NYG may need to steer clear here. Jones has enough arm strength, touch, and athletic ability, but there isn't a quick mind here. He does not see everything a top-tier quarterback does, whether it is coverage or pass rush based. After a long time scouting him, he is a pass for me. I compare him to a Ryan Tannehill type quarterback. So that's what I said about him coming out. And it's funny. I mean, I get more comments about Jones on both sides, lovers and haters, than any player, more than Saquon Barkley, who I'm on record saying I loved him. I wanted the Giants to draft him in 2018. So I don't get all of them right, and I will be the first to tell you that. Don't think it was a terrible pick because he has been a good player, but probably could have went elsewhere with that pick in 18. I just didn't see – this is similar to Thibodeau. Good player, first-round caliber, wouldn't be a top 10 pick for me. If I'm using a top 10 pick on a quarterback, I borderline know he's the guy. Jones, I thought he could be okay. With a really good supporting cast. That's what Ryan Tannehill was. He had a couple of really good years because the supporting cast was one of the best in the NFL. You know, we don't see Jones consistently bring others to another level. Now, he hasn't had a good supporting cast. He's had multiple coaches. We all know that. But even week 1 against Dallas is just more of the same. It's everything is falling apart around him. He threw gasoline on the fire. He made it worse. The 1st and 10 throw where he was going out of bounds and he threw into 3 defenders on Dallas across his body is something that I expect Bryce Young and CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson to do in their rookie year. Not Daniel Jones in year 5 after getting paid $40 million a year. On 1st and 10 too. 3rd and 10, I'll even give you, hey, you're trying to make something happen. 1st and 10, you can't make that throw. You can't miss that throw to Jalen Hyatt. That everything was falling apart around him in that opening loss, and it's not on his shoulders. There's 5 guys on this team that I would say played a lot worse than Daniel Jones in that game, at least. But part of the quarterback's job is to put the fire out, not put the gasoline on the fire. We saw Eli Manning make a career out of this. Do we not remember what happened to him at San Francisco when he got the crap beat out of him, and that he's the one that brought them back? Do you remember the game in Philadelphia when he got sacked 8 times and then he comes back and throws that game-winning touchdown to Plaxico Burress or Amani Toomer? Sorry, these are the traits that you need to see, and I would even say I expect to see out of a quarterback that you pay a big-time contract to. If he was still on a rookie deal and you're kind of still feeling him out, I get it. But after the 2022 season, I did a very long piece on what I thought Daniel Jones' market was for the NFL. And I said 3 years, $100 million. So I did want to resign him, but I did not want to hand him a $40 million contract that lasted 4 years. Now, the Giants can get out of this at not too bad of a cap hit after the 2024 season. But I still think the ethos, the message behind signing to him that kind of deal was, hey, we can't lose him because we don't have plan B. And that is a scary thought. You're a regime entering year 2. You got to have a quarterback. What is the quarterback plan? You can't just go get these guys off the street. And you don't want to go into the draft trying to get someone when you're picking as late as they were this year. Just wouldn't have worked. They would have been left with Will Levis. That's it. So what do you do? And, it's a hard decision. I do think they should have resigned him, but it was a rich contract. And to me, the jury's still out.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it on the head. A lot of people so you have like I said, you have the Daniel Jones faithfuls. I'll ride with you even when you're wrong. Then you got the anti-Daniel Jones, even when you do something right, it's not you. And then you hopefully have some people in between who are kind of, a little bit, let's be a little bit objective. He's absolutely has plenty of blame to take on his shoulders from the Dallas game. Even if he had only 6 plays that were on his shoulder, he didn't do much of those 6 plays either. You go back to all 22s you've seen, missed plays, all that. Just because, like you said, seeing ghosts, internal clock is so sped up, you're not helping at that point either. So he's responsible for that. In the same sense, I was kind of where you were. Happy to have him back, no problem. But a lot of that came from, if you don't sign him, what do you do next? Mm-hmm. What is the backup plan? Just like you, if we're in the 20s, how much are you willing to come up to get one of these QB prospects that everybody else already wants and probably isn't willing to part with?
Right.
What do you can't do a year of Tyrod Taylor after winning 9 and going to the playoffs. That's not going to happen. So I feel like they were stuck between a rock and a hard place. I'm with you. Let's see if he makes it to year 3 of this.
I'll say this. I think the Giants can win with him. I do. I do think the Giants can win with Daniel Jones. They're just going to need to hit on basically every pick they make and every signing they make, because I don't know if he's going to be the guy that raises everyone else's level up. That's what Eli Manning did.
Sure.
He got the most out of players around him. Ahmad Bradshaw, Brandon Jacobs, Jake Ballard, Kevin Boss. Like, who are these? Mario Manningham. Who are these guys without him?
Yeah.
The answer is nobody. They didn't go anywhere and do anything else after they could play with Eli Manning. Who is Daniel Jones going to do that for? Who is he going to elevate? That's what we need to see out of him. And it's going to put a little bit more pressure on this front office. They got to keep hitting doubles, triples, and home runs in the NFL draft. Singles aren't going to be good enough. They need to really kind of get something more out of every draft pick than what that initial slot usually gets.
Yeah, because if you keep hitting those singles all the time, you get to where you need to. It's going to be year 3 or 4, and he's either going to be gone or you're going to be gone. That's one of the two, because the regimes don't last that long enough. So they're also playing for their jobs, if you will. So all the professional stuff, awesome. Loved all the objective takes. Now give me a little bit of subjectivity before you go. As a Giants fan, the last dozen years have been god awful. Sans 2 seasons now, right? Before it was just one of that one-off in 2016 where Jerry Reese bought the defense and it just happened to work. And then last year when you went to playoffs, nice little change up, all that. It's been absolute garbage. As a scout, even during the Jerry Reese years when he's just nobody knows what he was doing. I don't know if Jerry Reese knew what he was doing. When those picks were being made and you're in this world, are you banging your head against the wall sometimes to his picks, or were you like, that might work out?
Man, it's
fan,
tough.
Forget your profession. As a fan, when you're watching this, what were you feeling like as a fan? How do you feel now about this regime, right? You've had over a year to process. How do you feel about the direction now than it's been for, like I said, a dozen years?
Current regime, I feel very good about. I could tell that there's a plan here, and I could tell, and they're bringing in resources from some of the best football franchises in the league right now. Philadelphia, Tennessee, Buffalo, teams that are just consistently good enough. They haven't gotten to the top, but they've been good enough. And I like the fact that it seems like it's a collaborative effort, and they're innovative. You're bringing in Mike Kafka and Brian Dable and Wink Martindale, guys that are going to constantly try new things. So I'm really optimistic about the future of this team. But there was a stretch there the Giants have not made the playoffs 2 years in a row since 2008. Think about that. They have not made the playoffs 2 straight years since 2008. And you do that enough times and you see enough first-round picks just not pan out. They don't become the centerpiece of your team. That's the purpose of a first-round pick. They got to be a centerpiece at some point. When you see these guys just miss over and over and over again, you go down the path of saying, like, yeah, I think I could do a better job than at this. I don't actually think that, right? I don't want anyone to – but you do – there were so many drafts where they had option A, they went option C. There was option A here, they went option D. Option A ended up working out, option D didn't. My prime example that I always like to bring up is I wanted Aaron Donald, and when they drafted Odell Beckham. And everyone called me a fool for those first few years when Beckham was taking it over. But I think everyone with a half a brain would say at this point, you're taking Donald over Beckham.
Oh, yeah, right? 10 out of 10 times. Yeah.
And, it's you can go down the list of years where they missed early in the draft, especially with second and third round picks. I mean, that's where you build the biggest supporting cast to the nucleus of your team. The guys that are on those teams for 7-8 years. And they did that for a long time prior to this debacle that started in 2008. So, am I banging my head? Because I do this professionally, I try to remove the emotion as much as possible.
Sure.
But I will say on record that they were one of the worst drafting teams that led to them being one of the worst teams in the NFL for a long period of time.
Yeah, and back to the mid-rounds you're talking about, the last productive third-round pick they had was Mario Manningham in, I think, 09. I think it was 09 is when he came on the team. In between 09 till now, it's just been mid-round misses. And you can't win in the NFL. It's just not possible. You got to hit on something.
But that's hard to do, to miss that many times.
So hard. This is the thing that I think drives Giants fans nuts with the O-line. Third regime still can't get it right. Is it just us? Like, what the hell is happening where they just can't get it right? For anybody, find that you got your Andrew Thomas, no problem, good. You got one. Everything else is kind of like not even close. So that's got to be frustrating because it's not like it's been 2 years. Talking about more than a dozen years, really. Because if you go back to that 2011 O-line, if I see it in my head, I remember the center being David Boss, who was absolute garbage, and they still somehow won because now this is the Eli rule, right? Yep. Elevating other players who are not as good.
And they had the pass rush. That's
the pass rush. So
and their offensive line was decent. Right? Yeah. If you're strong in the trenches and you have a good quarterback, you're going to have a shot. That's always got to be the way that you build the team. And until you're good there, you got to keep feeding that system.
Yeah. Last 2 questions. Worst Giants pick of all time in your memory bank? Could be from the past day. Yeah, I know. There's a lot.
Yeah.
Personal one. This one doesn't have to be from the scouting report. It could just be personally that, you know what, I hated this. And look at the production. That's why I hated it. And then your favorite Giants all-time pick.
I'll take my favorite just because he was one of my favorite guys just to watch play football. And I felt like he really was a big part of the culture when they were winning a lot of football games was Ahmad Bradshaw, a 7th round pick out of Marshall, I love day 3 value picks. I just think that that's something that every good team has a lot of, we could talk about round 1 through 3, and yes, you got to hit those guys as much as possible. But the day 3 guys, I mean, look at every Super Bowl winner. You're going to find multiple day 3 picks that just, really, really outproduce what you initially thought they would do. First round bust. I don't want to bring up David Wilson because his was more injury related. In terms of being one of the worst picks. I did think that was a very random pick back then. I just didn't understand what the thought process was there. I just want to make sure I have one. I'm just going through the early picks. The one I really despised.
Two names always come up at this point. What the two names
they were back to back: Eric Flowers and Eli Apple.
Yeah, they're the two names that always come up because they literally have been possibly the worst. Now they've gone on to have success. Some success, I will say. With Eric Flowers, it was obviously the position change and obviously getting the hell out of here. Eli Apple is still in the league, right? I think he's down with the Dolphins right now and starting because Jalen Ramsey's hurt. So there's been at least enough success. The tools were there. But at the time they came to the Giants, it just didn't work.
Mm-hmm. And it was also just some of the mindset stuff. The physical ability, they didn't play up to par. And that's not okay, but I get it. A lot of guys don't play up to par physically, but they didn't care. I think I remember one thing the end of Eli Apple to me as a Giants fan was there was a game they were getting blown out, I think for the second week in a row, and he was joking around on the sideline. And I just remember seeing that represented that entire era of New York Giants football. It was just a bunch of guys that didn't care. And that was back when Eric Flowers was, a revolving door at left and right tackle. And Eli Apple getting burned up and down the field and never making a play for this defense and laughing while they're losing. It's just, those are the quickest ways to get on a fan base's bad side is, there's Giants fans that cheer for this team 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And these guys, I understand that's not their situation they're in. But just, having a little bit more pride when you put that uniform on and truly caring about losing games and truly caring about getting better so that you can win more games for the fan base that is putting money in your pockets. The only reason you have a job in the NFL is because of the fans. It's the only reason. And, that's where this money's coming from. So I think it's always a really disrespectful punch in the face, kick in the gut to a fan when you're laughing on the sidelines when you're losing a football game because you're not good enough at your job.
Yeah, and it's one of those scenarios where everybody, I guess, handles adversity different. So you try to cut a young guy some slack of professionalism, but that was one of the key things was maturation, right?
Yep. I mean, we're still talking about it now.
We're still talking about Eli Apple and immaturity. Where at this point, you saw that blowout. I didn't see anyone joking. I saw a lot of pissed off people sitting on a bench, pretty ticked off. And that's kind of what you expect. That's your pride getting really, really hurt.
We'll find out Sunday. We'll find out this Sunday how much pride these guys have.
Yeah, and I kind of wish the San Francisco game was up next, just for the measuring stick scenario, if that makes sense. Not so much.
I understand that.
No knock on Arizona. No knock on Arizona whatsoever. They had 6 sacks last week.
They did.
On them at all. But I kind of wish it was a harder or more difficult roster per se, just to see how much actual pride there is involved. If that makes any sense about where I'm coming from.
I'll tell you this, the Giants are a better football team than the Cardinals. There's no question. You can't go lose to Josh Dobbs. If you go to San Francisco in prime time and lose a 4-point game, you can't even use that as a sign that they're not prideful. Them going to Arizona this week, this is, double-digit win or bust. This isn't go win by 2 points. If you have pride and you know how good your team is compared to a team that, to me, is obviously tanking for Caleb Williams already, starting Josh Dobbs at quarterback, and trading some of the players they did in preseason and letting go of Isaiah Simmons, you go down there and you're going for a double-digit win. Anything less that to me is disappointing. And I'm actually looking forward to this game against Arizona more than the one against San Francisco because San Francisco is a very good team. You can go out and have a great effort and still lose by 20 to them because they're so good. And plus, I don't really want to watch Andrew Thomas sit on the sideline while Josh Desadu tries to block Nick Bosa on the edge. So
yeah, that's the practical downside is the better team is going to kill you when you're already a little bit banged up. Versus, I just want to see where their mental fortitude and toughness is right now because everyone got challenged, disrespected, slapped in the face. And again, if you're not going for blood right now, I'm going to be in the same boat as you. Awesome. That now brings me to a whole different can of worms if that's what I see on this week.
I agree with you.
But David, you've given me more time than I expected. I appreciate you. Sorry, I ramble clearly.
It's okay.
I love the insight, especially when it's both professional and objective. So definitely appreciate you. It's probably your bedtime / hang out with your wife a little bit. I mean, with the way your day starts. So I thank you so much. Hopefully I'll get to check back with you later on the season. Hopefully it's not a dreaded season to check back in, but keep doing what you're doing, man. Tell everybody a little bit more about, again, what it is that Ourlads does, how to find you guys, what it is that you guys provide, just so everybody knows what you're about.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the kind words, and hope to be back at some point this season if we can line up a schedule, line up the time for it. But I would say I'm fairly active. My handle for Twitter is right on the screen, Ourlads_Sci. I'm probably putting something out there every day. So I'm always told I need to do more. But again, until this becomes a full-time gig, I'm not going to have that much time to do it. But I will say, if you're interested in just kind of hearing some scouting takes throughout the year, I know fans always look to the 2024 draft, the next draft. They're always looking. I'm always putting content out there about who I think you should keep an eye on. Some of the obvious guys that everyone else talks about, but more importantly, some of the not so obvious guys. Like years ago, you would have seen me talking about Wan'Dale Robinson and Josh Ezeudu and Darian Beavers and Micah McFadden. Like you would have heard about those guys prior to the Giants drafting them, among others. I also put every Wednesday Ourlads on their website. I posted on my timeline on Twitter the NFL All-Rookie team. So if you want to really keep track of what all the best rookies in the NFL are doing week to week, I make an all-rookie team every week, and I kind of do a little write-up on every player in terms of what they did, how they earned that spot. Week 1 was an amazing week for the NFL rookies, like one of the best I've ever seen out of an early week rookie class. Usually it takes a few weeks for these guys to hit the ground running, but really impressed with what they did in week 1, and you'll see that every week for me. And if you are into the NFL draft, I mean, we've already started our work on the 2024 NFL draft guide. It's the Ourlads guide. It's the oldest one in the business. We've been doing it for 4 decades now. And we have a really experienced team, guys that used to work in the league, and they really give me a lot of responsibility for that. So if you do want to see more of my work, that's really where you're going to see most of it on a public stage. That'll usually come out March, April of next year. And if you guys ever are watching a game, college or NFL, and you want to know who's on what team, what rookies are on the Cardinals that the Giants play, just pull up the Ourlads depth charts. They're the best in the business, and I'm biased, but everyone in the media says that as well. They're always referenced by anyone, including Daniel Jeremiah. So, get on there on the Ourlads website and just have that depth chart up when you're watching any game, and it helps out a lot.
All right, perfect, man. David, thank you so much. Definitely going to push everything forward. Like I said, for Ourlads, love the work you do. Appreciate your time. Like I said, have a great evening, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.